Peace everyone, Unmask here, and welcome back to another art club project. This is the last project of 2021, and it was very difficult, actually. I was very impressed by all of the people that followed along on this project because it was not an easy one. This is, of course, the Stormy Seascape that had the ship, the lighthouse, and the orca whales. It was quite a difficult project to do. Like I said, you'll see that I spend nearly all the time just working on the sky. The sky was by far the most difficult part, but a lot of fun, and I hope that those of you that did follow along enjoyed it. And for anyone that wants to do this project themselves, the full real-time tutorial is on the art club, my website. Link is in the description if you want to sign up. We're currently on a little bit of a break until the new year, but we're gonna come back, and in the new year we'll do a ton more projects. This past year we did somewhere around 33 projects. I kind of lost count, but we did a lot of projects this past year, and it's been fantastic. Appreciate all the people that have signed up over the year. It's been great. So the process of approaching the sky after staring at it for hours, trying to figure out how I'm going to do it myself, let alone describe it in a way that lets you follow along, relatively simple, is a very broad blocking end stage. You can see that I started with the black and dark blue before adding the green and tan here. And essentially I'm just blocking in the darkest shapes of the clouds with the dark color. And then I block in some of what I would refer to as like the undertone of the clouds. It has that green and orange color. And then once I get those initial shapes blocked in, I sort of just fill out the rest of the gray. Relatively light gray here that I used just to cover everything pretty much. And this is just one of the very, very many layers that I applied to the sky. It took over half of the time spent on this project was actually on the sky itself. I didn't realize that until I started editing the video, and I was watching through it and I was like, goodness, am I ever going to move on to the water or the lighthouse or the whales or anything other than the sky? Because I think about 70% of the entire project, the time that I spent was just on the sky itself. And I'm quite pleased with the way that it came out, so time well spent. I think probably around 16, 17 hours into this project. I'm just sort of guessing. I could go back and check the amount of time that I streamed it, since I streamed the entire process, but out of those, let's say 17 hours, I probably spent 13 of them on just the sky. So there's so much of the time on the sky. Now, once I get the blocking in stage, I go over most of the lighter stuff with the gray, sort of washing it out, and that pushes some of those darker tones that I applied further back. And then I start working in a second gray tone that separates the lightest part from the sky from the middle ground of the sky. And you can see how it creates sort of three layers. You have the light in the back right behind the ship, and then you have that darker gray that's sort of like the in-between layer, and then you still have the really dark shapes that I left up at the top. Once I establish those shapes and sort of those 3 layers, I come back in with the same colors. I didn't actually use very many colors, maybe like 5 or 6 for the sky in its entirety. And it's simply just maximizing what those colors can do for me. And so once I get these shapes in, I come back through with my dark blue. I believe this is the 770 color. And I just start putting in some of the minor details. They're more broad. They're more broad details. So you can start to see I'm making like a little bit more of the cloud clumps. I even add some more smaller details later on, but the process, work as large as you can, sort of like painting with a large brush. So get the big shapes, get a little bit of the colors situated, and then coming back in, and you can see I'm, forming the cloud shapes a little bit more specifically, a little bit more variation in the values happening throughout. And it starts to look a little bit more like a sky at this point, making those small adjustments, because at the beginning I had really big steps. Like I had either black or white, and then I added some color, and so I have a little bit of variation there with my values, but still the steps are quite obvious, right? So it's sort of like black, middle, and then white. And with this second layer, I am bridging the gap, is what I usually refer to it as, is where you take one value and you sort of gradiate it towards the next lighter value or darker value, however you want to think about it. And it's a slow process of doing this throughout the entire sky. And once I sort of start to bridge that gap, you can see it's bridged a little bit better here. Since I'm using mostly just grays to bridge this gap between the values, I start to lose my saturation of the orange and the green. So now you can see that I come back through with the orange and the green, add it back into the sky, and it really makes those colors more rich. And while I'm doing this, I'm also taking the time to sort of finesse a little bit of the details and start bringing in just a little bit more precision into the clouds and some variation of textures. And it's pretty rough when you apply it with the pencil, but when I come back with the blender, it sort of softens all of those grainy bits. And then I come back through with some of my darker colors, do the same thing. It's just a lot of playing around with the colors and adjusting the values. That's sort of what you got to do here. Watching it go by, and at this speed, this is, what is I think this is 4000x. Yeah, 4000x speed is what you're seeing it at. So you can just imagine, if you weren't there for the live streams, how much time I was actually spending. It makes it look a little bit easier when it's 4,000 times the speed. And even at 4,000 times the speed, the entire length is still about 22 minutes or so to watch the time lapse. So it's, yeah, long time. I didn't want to speed it up anymore because I want you to be able to see relatively what I'm doing as I explain it. Now, once I've established a lot of these darker shapes, it's only then I bring in the white to start adjusting where I want the light to really shine. It's sort of difficult to see the light in the video. This project, I think, it looks so much better in person. It really, really does. I actually still have it hanging on my wall because I haven't packed it yet, but it's really enjoyable to look at. Yeah, I really like the way that it came out, and I sort of wish that it would look as good in the video as it does in person, but I don't know if that's ever going to be possible. Now at this stage, I'm really fine-tuning the sky. I'm using all of the same colors. Like I said, I only used about 5 or 6 colors in the sky, and I continue to use those 5 or 6 colors throughout the entire project. I think I ended up adding 3 additional colors beyond the original 5 or 6, or somewhere around that. I think I used around 10 colors, if I'm not mistaken, including black and white, so not a huge color palette. And that's actually something that I brought up while working on this project, is how unnecessary it is to use, 20, 25 colors or your whole set of Carbothello pastel pencils. It's really the way that you apply just a few colors that make a big difference. And if you maximize their potential, that's what I usually describe it as, is maximizing your color palette. And once I have pretty good foundation for the sky, I'm reusing all of those colors to maximize them. I want the bridge that I'm creating between the values, I want that to be a whole complete bridge. So I don't want any awkward jumps between values. I want things to feel smooth. I want things to feel soft. And of course, I want it to look like a sky. And so a lot of that has to do with getting rid of graininess, getting rid of like more obvious pencil strokes, but also not sacrificing details. I think it's this stage that I'm sort of finalizing everything, using a gray to kind of bring out some of the edges of clouds a little bit, adjust the light. One of the things that I did with the light is I actually allowed some of the pencil strokes to show through. You can sort of see those, and I did that to give the light a little bit more of a linear direction. And finally finished with the sky, jump over to the lighthouse. The lighthouse was a small part. There's a few short streams during this project, because doing the lighthouse, I don't know, it still took about 50 minutes or so to do the lighthouse, even though it's small. Hard to tell how small it actually is, but it's only about the size of your pinky. And I wanted it to look good, so spent about 50 minutes or so on the lighthouse, just blending it out, getting the details the best that I could. And then that's it for the lighthouse. And now it's time for the water. The water is also one of the tricky parts of this project. And you'll see that I take this same approach that I did in the sky and apply it directly to the water. Now, the only thing that really changes is, well, not really a lot, actually. Because I imagine that if you flip this upside down, you pause it where I just apply the black here for the big shapes. Those big shapes, they look awfully like clouds, don't they? They sort of look cloud-like to me. And so the only thing that really changes in the water is the texture direction. Water generally has a horizontal texture direction, very much like skies do. Skies also have more horizontal direction. That's why I always stress about working horizontally when doing a sky. It's just easier to hide lines that way. But in the water, for the most part, calm waters will be horizontal, just like skies. But of course, this water is not calm. And so those otherwise horizontal texture directions, they will shift and morph as they create waves. And that's really the biggest change between the sky and the water, but really the approach is not that much different. Blocking in the large shapes, blocking in the midtones exactly like I did with the sky, and I'm just using grays and blacks here, focusing on establishing the two distinct value points. And then I start to build that bridge to connect those value points. And that simplifies things. After I have that sort of step-by-step value laid out, I apply the green, and this is the same green that I used in the sky. So still no new colors at this point, except for the one red color that I used in the lighthouse. But you can get all of this stuff with just a little bit of grays and black, establishing the values. Now, I use a blue color. Yes, here it is. I use this blue color. This is a new color. I did not use this color in the sky. This is just to add a little bit of a teal to the water throughout, and it adds a really nice, really nice subtle blue to the water that I liked a lot. And you know, these colors, you're very flexible with the colors that you choose. Yeah, I could have went in several different directions with the blue that I chose. I just chose one that I kind of liked. And now I'm using the orange that I used in the sky for obvious reasons. The water gets 90% of its color from reflecting the color in the sky. So I add a little bit of that orange in there. And from that point, I have the values laid out. I have the color tone laid out. And so now what I'm doing is I'm coming back with my dark blue, same color in the sky, and I'm just adding small little details. The same exact process that I did in the sky. The large stuff, then the small stuff. And as I fill in this information, the water sort of gets its texture. I come back through with my colors again, my blues, my greens, my oranges, because obviously laying on top of all this gray, those colors will desaturate. So I want to boost the saturation, so I add some of it back. And then I come through with the blender, and this is just a regular blending stump, nothing fancy about it. And I just smooth everything out. Now that everything is smooth, the thing that's really missing is the rough texture. And so I come through with my really light gray, I believe this is a 700 gray, and I start adding all of the sea foam on the waves. And these were just sort of scribbles when I was doing it. I soften the grain with the blender, and then I come through and I do some of the smaller highlight ripples, and this gives a lot of texture. These are those generally horizontal lines that I was talking about, and then you can see as they go up the waves, they change their shape. And then the water is done, believe it or not. And I jump into the whales. They only take a few minutes to do. This was another short stream, but again, I'm reusing all of the same colors. I didn't add any new colors to the whales. I threw in some of the blue from the water, the orange from the sky and the water, and just created some nice variation and shadows on the whales. They came out looking good. After I have them in place, then I use the white pencil to add some of the splashes around them. So I kept those things separated by layers. And last but not least, onto the little boat. And it's really hard to tell how small this boat actually is. And when I was rewatching this as I was editing it, I realized that the boat, it looked pretty good. It looked better than what I remember it looking like. And I start off with just sort of creating the silhouette a little bit with the black and the brown, and establishing just as much detail as I possibly could on how small it is, because it's only about the size of your thumb. Like the ship itself is about the size of your thumb. And I don't know if you can read it, but on the back I wrote Unmask art. So that's the name of the boat. It's really teeny tiny. It was hard to get the letters, but I think it's legible because my wife was able to read it but that was seeing it in person, not on camera, so I don't know if you can read it. You'll have to let me know in the comments if you can read it. After I do that, putting in the sails, I put in a little bit of the hardware, pulleys and whatnot. Put a flag at the top, Polish flag, and then all of the lines, and that's it. So yeah, the boat looks much better when it's not zoomed in. But yeah, that's the project. So I hope that you enjoyed this. And like I said, if you want to learn more, don't hesitate to join the art club. And you can do projects just like this. And I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.